Do we have free and fair elections in Australia? Should you go to the Freedom Day March this Saturday? And will the arrest of Zoe Lee stop the Victorian Government? This is The Arc with Riccardo Bosi. Riccardo, welcome back to the show.
Always a pleasure, Joel.
A lot's happened this week.
Big week in Australia.
Indeed. I really wanted to get the elephant in the room out of the way. We've all seen this video of Zoe Lee being arrested in Victoria, and a lot of people have been very enraged. A lot of people are scared. And the video online's gotten over 6 million views last I checked, just on the Facebook stream. And a number of people have shared it. I mean, Sky News have shared it. They've got hundreds of thousands of views. And on top of that, we've seen the international media also comment on this. I follow a number of people like Tim Pool, Ben Shapiro in the US. They didn't once comment on the election of Scott Morrison, yet this caught their attention. And I think in a time of hyper aggression from the different sides becoming very polarized, I thought it'd be very interesting to start this off by looking at the video and seeing what we can discern from it.
I have no idea why you guys are doing this. Yeah, you can show me your search warrant before you go through my house.
You're the occupier of the tenant?
Yeah, I own this house.
There it is. That's a search warrant.
Search warrant for what?
Now, what I will explain to you is if you want to listen, you got your phone going.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Right. Now, you're under arrest in relation to incitement.
Incitement?
What's that? Now, you're not obliged to say or do anything, but anything you say or do may be given in evidence.
Excuse me, incitement for what? What on earth? Excuse me, what on earth?
Just put your phone down.
Can you record
to-
this? I'm in my pajamas.
What's
I have
this?
an ultrasound in an hour because
Yeah,
I'm
she's
pregnant.
pregnant, so...
I'll take it easy.
What's this about?
But I have an ultrasound
Just let me
in an
finish.
hour.
Let me finish and I'll explain. It's in relation to a Facebook post, in relation to a lockdown protest you put on for Saturday.
Yeah, and I wasn't breaking any laws by doing
You
that.
are actually. You are breaking the law. That's why I'm arresting you in relation to
In
incitement.
front
How
of
can
my
you arrest
children,
her?
In
That's-
front of my 2 children.
Can't you just say to her, take the post down? Like, come
I'm
on.
happy to
Not obliged.
delete the post. This
Yeah,
is ridiculous.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I have to give you these cautionary rights. You understand?
Yeah, that's
You're
fine.
not-
Like, I'm
not
happy to
obliged
delete the
say
post.
do
This is
anything.
ridiculous.
Anything
Like,
you
this is
say
in front of my... That's
maybe
fine.
giving evidence. You understand that?
Yeah, that's fine. But my 2 kids are here. I have an ultrasound in an hour.
me
Like,
finish.
I'm happy to
Let me
delete
finish.
the post.
You also have the right to communicate with or to communicate with a legal practitioner. You understand those rights?
Yeah, this is ridiculous.
Yeah, this is a bit unfair. Come on, mate.
No,
What about she just doesn't do the event? Like, it's not like she's done it.
Well,
She
you've
made a
already
post.
committed the offence. So I'm not going to
So that's an offence.
Now, the search warrant entitles us and we're required to seize any computers, any mobile devices you have.
What on earth?
Yeah, can I just get your
this
badge there,
crap?
mate?
It's all there. Okay? You understand?
No, I don't really understand what I've done wrong. I really don't understand what... Like, this is ridiculous. I've got...
This is a lot of stress on her too. She's pregnant, like, come on. I'm relaxed. This is just very unfair.
What we're going to do, I'll explain what we're going to do. We seize any computers and
That's fine. Can I just
let me finish. Any mobile telephone you've got, okay? So what we want is any mobile telephone you've got.
You gonna need that?
No, that's actually my sister's phone. It's not your
Yeah,
name.
it's her sister. So.
Doesn't matter. Any device in this house we're taking.
This is
Well,
ridiculous.
You're not taking my phone.
Well,
I'm taking any device.
any
That's
device.
my phone. It's nothing to do with her. It's my phone.
It's hard to watch. I mean, I saw it twice yesterday and it was very, very confronting. They called us COVIDiots and conspiracists. I remind you, we've got an Italian on my left and a Lebanese Syrian on me. Didn't Hillary Clinton lose the election right after she called half the country deplorables?
That's exactly right. Sticks and stones may break my bones. The best thing we can do with the name calling is just ignore it. It's evidence that, in this case, it's Channel 9, I think. It's fake news. All the things you've been hearing about Trump in the US and fake news, this is in fact true. The media is against you. The media is not interested in helping you. The media is trying to push a narrative. that video should go viral. It should continue going viral because it's designed, well, its impact is twofold. It'll either terrify some people and enrage others. And here's an interesting spin on it. Terrorism is, the textbook definition of terrorism is politically motivated violence. That's it. So if a criminal, robs a bank and takes money, that's not terrorism. He just wants the money. But politically motivated violence is terrorism. This to me is a prima facie example of the government using the police as an act of terror against the people. They are trying to intimidate them. Now the two responses are, as I said, one is terror and one is anger. Now there are a number of freedom marches happening this weekend around the country, following what has happened globally. And it's not an accident that this has been done, because when people have been frightened, the last thing they need is more fear, and that's what they're doing. They're trying to frighten the Australian people. The other thing is, it's going to exorcise them to the point where they might get violent. Now, my understanding, and I have no special insight, but my understanding about these freedom marches is, it's simply a peaceful gathering of people to express their discontent at the behaviour of the governments. And to call us COVIDiots or conspiracy racists is not only insulting, it's just flat wrong, because none of the numbers add up. You don't have to be a conspiracy theorist to look at the numbers and ask a legitimate question of the government and say, how do these numbers lead to a set of actions like that? The CDC, the Centre for Disease Control and Prevention in the US, recently released that out of the 160 odd thousand deaths, only 9,000 were actually COVID deaths. The other deaths were 90-year-olds with heart attacks that might have had the coronavirus bug. And so a tiny proportion of the actual deaths were COVID related. So it's a bald-faced lie to say that this is a pandemic. Now that's not a conspiracy, that's just fact. It's just a bald-faced lie. And nobody in the media is holding any government to account, not one. And so it's a con. It is a scam. It's exactly what the people think it is. What the media is trying to tell you to do is don't believe your own lying eyes. And don't believe the other party as well. Because you've got Scott Morrison and Josh Frydenberg allegedly expressing their discontent with what Dan Andrews is doing, but not in reality. They don't care. It's kabuki, it's shadow puppets. They are giving the impression. Gladys Berejiklian in New South Wales, the Premier, is allegedly angry with Palaszczuk in Queensland. Not really. They're all on the same sheet of music. And I can tell you Palaszczuk is in trouble in Queensland. But all the parties are playing the same game. And what they're trying to do, if Morrison genuinely cared for Victorians, he knows he has a legislative power to already take action now. For example, he said he's going to tear up the Belt and Roads Initiative. He already has the authority to do it. But he's now saying we'll pass laws that make sure that we examine all agreements between federal, state and local governments that make internationally. Well, guess what? The states don't have that authority. The local governments aren't even in the Constitution. They have no authority, and yet they are. And I think I may have mentioned once before, Newcastle Council, its strategic plan mimics exactly the United Nations strategic plan.
Yeah, that's right.
So what Morrison is pretending, on the one hand, he says we're going to control it. He already has that power. And council should not have the authority to do any international deals. Roads, rates and rubbish, that's all they're there for. End of story. And so it is insulting, it is dangerous, and it is provocative.
I just wanted to touch on one thing you said about the numbers from the CDC. I was listening, as I said before, to a guy named Tim Poole, and he reported that in the CDC statistics, I mean, we used to joke that George Floyd was included in the numbers. Turns out, I think he was. Because if you read the CDC statistics, because for those of you that didn't know, George Floyd actually had coronavirus when he was tested, and he passed away. If you have COVID and you die from intentional acts or self-inflicted acts, that will be counted as a COVID death. So that includes, let's say, someone kills you in a murder and you also test positive for COVID. That includes if you fall down the staircase accidentally and you die. That's a COVID death. It's very enraging to be called a COVID idiot but it's simultaneously hilarious because of the deplorables link. But, I mean, I lost my job. 1 million other Australians lost their job. And for them to be called COVIDiots for just questioning the lockdowns and wanting to express their opinions on that, they're not all 5G believers. They're not all anti-vaxxers. For you to treat them with such disrespect, these taxpayers, it's very insulting. And, I mean, you've said it many times, Riccardo, the power does not lie with the politicians. I can't remember who said this, but men do not honour titles like they used to. Titles should not honour men. Men should honour titles. But I did want to touch on these marches because people are very enraged at these lockdowns. I mean, this weekend will be announced whether Victoria has an extension to their lockdowns. At this stage, it looks like it might be, it's probably going to be a 6-month extension to the emergency powers for the Chief Medical Officer in Victoria. But we will see a plan from Dan Andrews in Victoria as to the pathway, I'm sick of that word, to opening up Victoria completely. Riccardo, what are these marches? Are there any dangers with these marches? There's been a lot of things going around, a lot of name calling, a lot of smearing of some of the organisers around Australia. Can you help us navigate this?
Sure. And it's not just the COVID issue itself. Let me give you 2 more stories out of Melbourne, out of Victoria, and then we'll talk about the marches specifically. But this explains why so many people are frustrated. 2 examples. One gentleman I spoke to personally. He fell off his ladder and smashed his wrist. Not just a broke, but a smash. And he went straight to the hospital because, as they said to him, unless you have surgery, you will lose the use of your wrist. That's how serious it was. They demanded a COVID test. He declined. I said, I don't want a COVID test. And they said, well, we're not going to treat you at all. Eventually, they did give him some painkillers, and as a result of the insistence of the medical staff and the painkillers, he relented because he just needed medical treatment. And so he took the COVID test, was found negative. They bandaged his hand and sent him home and said, no, we can't treat you. We need the bed for somebody else. He went to 2 other metropolitan hospitals in Victoria, and they both declined to treat him. Strangely enough, the police arrived almost immediately and accosted him, 6 coppers, and were about to arrest him, and for not wearing a mask, and accost him. So how did the message get from the hospital to this guy so quickly? And that's a question people need to ask as well. And he reached into his pocket to get the medical certificate that indicated that he didn't need a mask, and the police weren't impressed. Story number 2, and this was there was a video that's since been evaporated from the internet. There's a curfew in Victoria. Apparently, the bug is dangerous at night. So 8 o'clock, everybody's indoors. Well, one gentleman decided to take his rubbish out, and he forgot to take it out before 8. So at 9 o'clock, he's in his home, taking his rubbish bin out. The police cars arrive, lights on, coppers come out, and one threatens to draw his weapon and put it in his face. Now, on the upside, one policeman in the video was obviously extremely uncomfortable, and he stood back. But this other lunatic, so let's not talk about the cops like they're all good or all bad. They're not. Most are good people doing a tough job. I had a lot of time for the boys and girls in blue. But this lunatic was threatening to draw his gun on a guy putting his rubbish bin out. So when we talk about why people are protesting, it's not conspiracy theorists. There's so much going on in Victoria that doesn't get any airplay because the fake news won't report it. So that sets the scene. A lot of people are terrified. People ring me up, another woman. They've been in business for themselves for 26 years, making an honest living, doing renovation work. They're only allowed to do emergency renovation work now. Their kids can't do what they're doing. Everything is being shut down. And once again, there is no logic to it. The numbers don't add up. It is clear something is going on. You don't have to decide what that something is. But here is a problem, the size of which is minuscule, and the response is destroying the state and the nation. And Morrison and Andrews are as complicit as each other, because Morrison, as I said, has the power. So let's now talk about the marches. This is a spontaneous event. Nobody can organise this. And I've heard stories of people trying to organise it, trying to change dates, and they haven't succeeded because people aren't interested in following anybody. You use the term, and it's what I'm using and attributing to you because it's exactly right. There is a rebellion against the political class. They don't care. People don't care where you're from. You're a politician, you're out. I'm not interested. And so they're spontaneous, genuinely spontaneous. A couple of people have tried to sidetrack it. I heard a story of one particular organiser who turned out to be a police stooge. And he was trying to get information, feed information to the police, and change the dates. He's been picked up and thrown out apparently by the few that are actually talking about it. And they're trying to change dates. They're trying to disrupt the whole process. We've also been told, just by the way, that the police will be placing agents provocateurs within the group to cause violence, and that will give the police the excuse to get violent with the crowd. Now, as far as I've heard, and I have no real special insight into what's going on, but as far as I've heard, this is a peaceful gathering for people to stand there and communicate in a very peaceful manner their disquiet. If there's any violence, I can guarantee you now, it'll be agents provocateurs placed by the police at the bidding of the government. We'll have our cameras out. Everyone attending that rally, that peaceful gathering, should have their cameras out. Now, be sensible. You know, wear a bandana. That acts as a mask that makes sure you're safe. Wear a bandana and just be peaceful. But if something goes sour, get your cameras out and film it. Because the people that are causing the trouble, it wouldn't surprise me if they are part of internationally funded organisations that have the veneer of legitimacy, but they're not. But film them. Stand back, be polite, don't resist the police, stand back from any confrontation, but record it all and get it online, because I guarantee you the people that are causing the trouble will have nothing to do with you. Now, this has happened previously. Don't trust the mainstream media to report the truth, because they won't. There isn't. Look for yourself. Find anybody that is telling the truth, and you won't find it. So, the gatherings, peaceful, non-violent, non-compliance. What people have to realise is that there's no precedent for this in Australia. Very few Australians have had to fight in a physical sense. I don't mean fisticuffs, I mean armed fight. None have ever had to fight on Australian soil for Australia. None. We are here now. There is no precedent. So if people are confused and unsure what to do, there's a good reason for that, because what the hell do you do with this? No one can recognise what's going on. They don't want to believe that we're being so oppressed. This is Nazi Germany. And it's not a throwaway. It's real. This is Soviet Russia. This is communist China. And people are just confused. And look, I've got to repeat this. One of my favourite American philosophers, Rocky Balboa. And the words are so profound, and take them to heart and listen to it over and over again. Find the clip, and it goes like this. He's talking to his son, who's complaining and whining and carrying on. And Rocky says, let me tell you something you already know. The world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are. It will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. You mean nobody's going to hit as hard as life. But it's not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, how much you can take and keep moving forward. That's how winning is done. Now, if you know what you want, now go and get what you want. Now, if you want your freedom, if you want your country, you're going to have to be ready to take the hits. It's as simple as that. Because if we sit back and do nothing, if we lie prostrate in front of totalitarians, we will lose. Australia will enter hundreds of years of darkness. And if you think it won't happen to you, it will. You've seen the evidence. A pregnant woman arrested for a Facebook post? Are you kidding me?
Trying to organise the march. Her name was next to it.
If you can't see the insanity in this, I can't help you. And we don't need everybody, but we just need enough in whatever way we can. But this cannot stand.
I highlight the insults that they trade with us because it's not like they're not being warned. I mean, if the silent majority doesn't actually stand up and speak up, you will lose, you can lose. And we highlighted that with Romeo a few weeks ago. And as Jordan Peterson's new rule in his book goes, where responsibility has been abdicated, opportunity lurks. You want to be the one seizing the opportunity, because you can be damn well sure the wrong people will be trying to seize that opportunity. So the marches are going ahead in a number of different states. I think Perth is pretty much the only state that doesn't have one. Will you be going to the march?
Great question, but you asked that a lot. I've also been advised by my security detail to be very careful. I've been asked to attend Melbourne, I've been asked to attend Sydney, and I've been asked to attend Brisbane. And it's easy enough to get over the borders if you know how. So I won't be revealing which, if any, I'll be attending. I'll just leave it at that at this stage.
Okay. In terms of the marches going ahead, if you're sick, stay away. All right, we don't want you there. As Riccardo said, make sure you wear a mask wherever you're protesting, and just do the right thing. Don't be violent at all. You know what you have to do. The freedom marches in the US that have happened historically in the 60s, the ones that achieved anything were the peaceful ones. They weren't the Black Panther ones, they weren't the armed ones, they weren't the violent ones. Ferguson achieved nothing in 2014. It's the peaceful ones, and that's what you have to do. I want to pivot now to how the A1 party is going. I've heard it's been doing very successfully well. A lot of people have been showing a lot of interest. A lot of people have been asking me for more detail, which I've been directing them to your site at A1. We want to navigate our way out of this situation. We don't want to see more pregnant women locked up right before their ultrasounds. Do we have some positive news, Riccardo?
Oh, huge. A1 is, just so people are aware, A1 is a vehicle by which we can save the country. Right? Politics is just one of the lines of operation. There are many other aspects to our plan, our strategy, which we give no visibility to. That's confidential. But it's a bit like the landings on Normandy beaches, D-Day, 1944. The troops just didn't turn up on the beach and charge machine guns. That's insanity. What happened was, it was preceded by the resistance destroying railway lines and fuel dumps to make sure the Germans couldn't resupply and reinforce. And then the paratroopers came in and they secured the bridges, the crossroads. And then the Navy began its naval gunfire bombardment of the fortifications. And then the Navy again delivered the troops to the shore. And then finally the infantry assaulted the beaches. So as you can see, there are several what we call separate but synchronized lines of operation. And politics is only one. We have 6 all up, and we have many phases. The only ones we talk about is the politics and the first 2 phases. The first phase is build the party, which is almost complete. The policy and the constitution, which has taken a lot of excellent work by some very talented people, are just about ready to go, which is great news. Phase 2 is win the people. That's it, win the people, because this whole game is predicated on a grassroots movement. We reject people with lots of money that want a position of power and influence. No, go earn your place. Learn to be understood, known and liked and trusted by your electorate. That's how we win. So we're not interested in anything else. We're moving forward in a very measured and very thoughtful way. But the numbers are growing. In the last few days, we've had another few hundred sign up as supporters. We're not even a party yet. And so the numbers are coming in, and the trickle has now become a steady flow. And I received many calls direct from people. And people don't follow Australia One because they have to. They follow us because they want to. Because they can see that we're the only organisation out there not only saying what's got to be said, but we're doing what's got to be done the right way. And it's not about us, it's about the people. It's about getting the people done. So the news is fantastic. Very, very encouraging. The one thing I'll finish with, though, is for the Liberal, Labor, Nationals and Greens supporters out there. And I'm not talking about the party machines, because their party machines are utterly corrupted. And you've got these very good people that believe that their party machines can be fixed. And I've only got one question for them. How many more children have to be raped and killed before they realise that the Liberal Party, the Labor Party, the Nationals and the Greens have presided over the destruction of our country? And there are good people in there, I don't doubt that. But there's a difference between good and being effective. And their parties are not effective. Not at all. Not at all. So great news for A1, bad news for the others. And as I said, we're moving forward slowly and in a measured and a very thoughtful way. And one day we will be the party of government. Don't fight the government, become the government.
That's right. You've the path forward is certainly through a sophisticated party and constitution going ahead and really making some change. But that will all count for nothing if not this topic we're about to touch on now. Do we have free and fair elections, Riccardo?
Free, fair and transparent? Absolutely not. Now, last week I mentioned Dr. Amy McGrath's book, Defrauding of Votes, with an introduction by Bob Bottom, one of Australia's greatest investigative journalists, whose work resulted in numerous royal commissions, helped cleaning up what was one of the most corrupt states in Australia, New South Wales. And she recounts in exquisite detail the actual evidence of fraudulent votes. And just very quickly to recap on last week, elections are won on the marginals. And you'll hear this term by the major parties. They had an excellent marginal seat strategy, which is code for they cheated better than the other side did. Because the marginals are won and lost on a few hundred votes in some cases. So if there's a 6-seat majority, you think, well, that's a convincing win. Not really. Not really, because those 6 seats may have swung on 200 or 300 votes. So you get a bongo van with 20 people that travel around the electorate voting multiple times. You get those votes required to win. And as I said last time, in 86 when Hawke won, the Labor Party was hooting and hollering because they said we previously flipped seats and now we've flipped an entire election. And that's the Labor Party making this claim. And so Amy McGrath, and I met with her and spoke to her in detail. She's recorded all of this, but that's history. And that goes to show this has been going on for decades. Now, do you think in the last few years that the politicians have got honest? Hardly, not at all. Yeah. So let's talk about contemporary problems. And you've got to understand that there are many layers to this. So let's talk, and I've got to get the detail right. This might be a bit dry, but bear with me because it's extremely interesting.
It's very important. It shouldn't be understated.
Okay, let's have a look. Electoral fraud. Now let's talk about the Australian Electoral Commission, the AEC. Now the head of that is a guy called Tom Rogers. Now I know Tom. Tom was at the Royal Military College as a former military officer. He always struck me as a nice guy, honest, and just a decent man. So this says nothing about Tom at all. This is not about him. I think he's a good guy. But what we don't know about are those that work for him. Because as anybody knows, if you want to control an organisation, you put the honest guy on top and you put a couple of crooks underneath. And they report, and that's how things get done. You don't put the crook in charge. Now, the Australian National Audit Office is the Australian government entity that audits everything to make sure it's being done correctly, the ANAO. And they did an assessment on whether the AEC appropriately established, and listen carefully, and managed contracts for the 1, transportation of completed ballot papers, so transportation of completed ballot papers, and 2, the Senate scanning solution. Now, the transportation of completed ballot papers, why is that important? Well, if you remember on Outsiders some time back, Ross Cameron admitted that they discovered after the fact that the company that was contracted to take away the Liberal Party's classified waste was actually run by the Labor Party. So you can check that out on TV for yourselves. But that's what has been. That's why transportation of completed ballot papers is absolutely critical. And secondly, the Senate scanning solution for the 2016 federal election. Now, here's what the ANAO came out with, the audit office. The AEC had, whilst they might have set the right standards to make sure everything was done according to Hoyle, they had limited insight into whether its contractual and procedural risk treatments were effective. So having set the standard, they had very little insight in whether they were applied. Let's look specifically at the transportation of completed ballot papers. Ballot boxes were left unattended, which is against the rules. You can't have a box of ballot papers, which is cardboard. They used to be wood and metal and with padlocks because it's valuable. They're blank checks, right? But ballot boxes were left unattended, and boxes were found to be opened and unsealed. The AEC did not obtain assurance of the political neutrality of the personnel transporting the ballot papers. So once again, who transported and had control of those ballot boxes? They don't know. The AEC is unaware that any ballot papers were not accounted for. So instead of having 100% count every ballot paper that was issued and then accounted for, no. So once again, these ballot papers are better than blank checks. You get a wad of those and you can fill them in any way you want to. And in fact, there's previous evidence of that being done.
Wow.
So that's on the ballot papers. The Senate scanning solution, and this is the solution where the Senate papers, because it's such a complex voting system, that it's scanned electronically and then the count is done that way. Quote, insufficient attention was paid to ensuring the AEC could identify whether the system had been compromised. So the AEC doesn't know whether the system was compromised at all. They don't know. Please count these ballots for us. Do you want to check to see if it's no, that's fine. You just tell us what the number is. And the AEC was not able to demonstrate compliance with all elements of the Commonwealth Electoral Act. So you've got the Electoral Act 1918, which outlines exactly how elections are supposed to go. And the AEC was not able to demonstrate whether that was complied with. So you've got the rules and nobody checked. And this is the 2016 election. And this is from the Australian National Audit Office.
Good God.
So, that's bad enough. And that's shocking news. And Australians should be up in arms. That's why this is a multifaceted problem we've got. As bad as Comrade Dan is in Victoria, your vote isn't worth your vote. If you think you've got a free and fair election being run, and again, not a criticism of Tom Rogers, but if you think the elections in Australia represent the will of the people, you're wrong. You are clearly wrong. And yet nobody is interested, and let me prove to you that nobody's interested in fixing this problem. I advise and assist many volunteer groups within my capacity to plan and conduct strategies for various objectives. And I've worked with a number of groups who have been working to clean up the vote fraud in Australia. I have no problem doing that at all. I'm happy to help. I was with one such group, and I was the new chum at the table. And we were sitting at the table, we were discussing strategies and approaches and the nature of the problem. And at one point, the question was asked, but what if the corruption is advantageous to our party? And being the new guy, I just sat there and said nothing, waiting for these older, wiser heads who have been in this game for 20, 30 years to say something. And there was a stony silence fell over the entire table. It became clear to me later they were trying to sound me out. I said nothing. And then I promptly ceased working with this organisation because it was clear they were happy to clean up the opposition's dirt, but if it was to their advantage, they wanted to leave it in. So I just walked away. And so this is extremely dangerous. And it speaks to a larger issue. It's still on the voting, but it speaks to a larger issue. Be very careful whom you trust. There are a lot of people saying very nice things, but many of you understand the concept of controlled opposition. The media is largely controlled opposition. It gives you the impression that something's being done, but in reality nothing is done. And they'll yell and scream and be very passionate, but they don't actually act. And these groups too, these volunteer groups that apparently are there to help, are there to corral the resistance and stifle any genuine efforts. And this particular group had been doing this for 20 plus years and they hadn't had one victory. Now what does that tell you? Okay, so we'll leave that one there, but that's something that the people of Australia need to understand, that you don't get free and fair elections, and you don't get transparency. I mentioned briefly last week, the electoral roll is completely corrupted, utterly corrupted, means nothing. Houses that don't exist have voters in them apparently, dead people vote, cemeteries vote, that's a popular one, lots of votes in cemeteries. So the electoral roll is crooked. The people that are doing the counting, I mentioned again last week at the Eden Monaro by-election, the young Liberals saw young Labor people counting votes, and they saw Liberal votes, formal Liberal votes, being put in the informal pile. And when they reported to Liberal Party headquarters, they said, we're not going to challenge it.
I was there.
So, reach your own conclusion. Think for yourself. The only person you can trust is yourself. And I mean that quite sincerely. I got asked last night, I was doing a talk to the Queensland supporters of A1. It was a very good evening. And somebody asked the question, why should I trust you? And my answer was quite simple, don't trust me. You've got to trust yourself. That's why our party is designed to get individuals in their electorate getting the electorate support. And I have no say over who the candidate is, as long as they adhere to the principles of the party.
It's not the Riccardo Bosi party.
Absolutely not. Yeah. And as I said, if I want to run, I don't get an automatic pre-selection. I have to literally persuade my electorate to vote for me like everybody else, no special pass.
Exactly. And that's the most exciting part of all, seeing very similar forgive me saying, but primaries in the process to find the best candidate for the area.
Absolutely, there'll be primaries in every electorate. Now you might have one candidate, you might have 15, and the primary will continue into who will lead the A1 government. So let's say we get enough MPs to form government. Normally, the successful members of parliament will vote amongst themselves who the prime minister will be. Now that's fraught with danger, because all you do is get horse trading. If you give me this ministry, then you'll get my vote. Not with us. It'll be a nationwide plebiscite of the members of A1 to decide who the prime minister will be.
That's great.
And all of a sudden the PM has the support of and the imprimatur of the people, and not his ministers. And if the ministers start playing, his or her ministers, and if the ministers start playing ducks and drakes, they get recalled. The control of the people over the power within this party is absolute, and it's brilliant. That's why it's taken so long to get the constitution right, but it's exquisite.
Can you explain that recall election? Because I reckon that's
Sure.
one of the best aspects.
Sure, it exists in Switzerland, for example, and in certain states of the United States. And it's a provision that says this, and we'll set the number, but let's say in an electorate, and this is before we even get into power, an electorate has many branches, and the branches then vote to elect an electorate president who has oversight over the entire electorate and make sure that all the branches are doing what they have to do. Now, if the electorate president, let's say, stops meeting the needs of the branches, that individual can be recalled. So 10% say, we don't like where you're going with this. You're a Green, and you're after full-term abortion and lots of ridiculous plans. They take a vote. He's sacked. He or she is sacked, and they have another vote for a new electorate president. That's just within the electorate. So everybody's responsive 24/7, 365. That's within the party. Now, when we get people into Parliament, same deal. We have an MP, and we're going to put this law across the country so it affects every MP from every party in every electorate. Any electorate may recall their MP. So if the MP makes a bunch of promises, is elected, and fails to deliver within a reasonable period of time, that electorate, regardless of the party the MP to which the MP belongs, they can be recalled. They're sacked by 10%. Let's say the electorate say we want you out, or 15%. They have to recontest the election.
That's excellent.
And so 24/7, 365, John Smith, the Honourable John Smith MP, when Jacko and Norell ring up, he's going to answer the phone and listen to Jacko and Norell and say, yep, no problem. I work for you. How can I help?
Geez, that's perfect. I've often said that our technology has our constitution is outdated. That's something the left gets right. And the right are also saying that as well. The constitution is outdated. And I just see this as a really good step in the right direction for this. Because what it does is it really helps to answer the question of technology. How do we, because of the fast-paced nature of politics now, and because we can keep an eye on our politicians the whole time, if they step out of line, we should be able to say, no, you come back right now. We don't wait 3 years. We don't travel on horseback anymore. You come back right now, and you need to answer. But what was the percentage? I heard you say 10%, but is that
10 to
actually
15. The initial planning figure was 10%. That might be a fraction low.
Okay.
Because the trouble is then you get disruptive elements that constantly disrupt the process, and the process becomes the punishment. So we're going to make sure that, and we've got to model the numbers. We're going to have to make sure that hurdle is a sufficiently significant number to make sure that it's not used as a time waster or disruptive to the good governance of the country.
Awesome. That's awesome. That's really good to hear. I mean, that's one of the best takeaways I take from this interview, that there is stuff being done. There are constitutions being written up by real experts in a party that are thinking through things very well. It can be very disillusioning seeing how a lot of our politicians, the best among us, is what they believe themselves to be, to have just look at simple things like the coronavirus and say the science is on their side, and it's not. But when I hear this constitution and the way it's being put forward and the way how well it's being thought through, that's one of the few things I'm really looking forward to.
Can you imagine an Australia One government in Victoria where the people don't have to risk arrest and a blood nose to express their discontent? They get a percentage of the Victorian electorate and says, Dan, we think you're a lunatic, you're sacked. and we vote, we want another election, and then everybody gets up and they sell their plan. And the A1 plan would be, right, we're going to open up the state immediately because there is no risk. If you're sick, you self-isolate. If you want help, we'll give you help, but get back to work as quick as you can. And the state would recover in no time.
Absolutely.
And all of this would be just a bad dream. That's the difference between what we currently have with the four majors and what Australia One is proposing. They get to open their state up because the majority of Victorians believe that's exactly what should be done.
Exactly, because all we can do right now is rely on the Attorney General to completely uprule. No, not the Attorney General, the Governor General to completely overrule the government and recall them. Is that all that can happen for Victoria right now?
Nothing's going to happen. Absolutely nothing, because whether it's the Governor General or whether it's the Prime Minister or it's the Premier, there's a couple of levels to this. First of all, we have no valid constitution. The constitution currently being quoted by each government is a fabrication. There was no referendum for the Australia Act in 1986, which changed the constitution. You cannot change the constitution without a referendum, and yet they did it. So there is no lawful government in Australia. I know people have difficulty when I say that, but Scott Morrison has no more legal right to be Prime Minister than my dog. In fact, my dog would probably do a better job. But the fact is, there's no legal right.
Yeah.
This is a farce, a pretense. Everybody knows it. I've spoken to constitutional experts in Canberra during the Eden Monaro by-election, and everybody understands that it's all a lie, but they can't see a way around it. We can. There is a way around it. We can come back to a constitutional government, and in time, I am sure we will, because Australians are learning. They are learning to live in fear because the Constitution, even as it's written, guarantees them no rights other than trial by jury in the federal jurisdiction. Other than that, what Comrade Dan is doing, largely, except for the trade restrictions, is largely okay. I mean, it's egregiously immoral, but it's largely okay. Now, if Australians want to live like that, sit back and do nothing. But I can see a time, and it will come. And we're working on it now because it's going to take years to get there. But we're working on a concept that we will become a constitutional republic. Now, not the nonsense republic that Peter Fitzsimon and those lunatics are touting, because as Professor David Flint, quite rightly describes, that the republic that they want is a politician's republic. Oh, it's as simple. Replace the Governor General with a president. Well, as David Flint correctly points out, the Prime Minister can more easily sack the President than his driver. And now we enter the realm of real totalitarianism. That's the danger. That's why we need years to develop this. Now, it's going to take a long time before the Australian people decide it's time to revisit our Constitution. Because even the 1901, the original 1901 Constitution, with its lawful amendments as a result of referenda, even that is insufficient. Because it was predicated on a different time, a different place, and a different morality of the people. In those days, there was a moral people. The more moral the people, the fewer laws you need. If you have to make a law for everything, that's a big sign that the morality is gone. And no level of law can ever replace individual morality. And I think I might have said it last week. But we can't govern ourselves as a nation until we can govern ourselves as individuals. You can't govern yourself until you can govern yourself. And so there's a multifaceted, multi-layered approach that we have to take. As I said, we have 6 lines of operation, most of which are confidential. But this is a large, complex operation that requires levels of skill, training, and experience that no politician's got. None of them have had the training for this. Look at Scotty. Solon Scott from marketing. What qualifications does he have? Josh Frydenberg, Treasurer. What qualifications did he have for that? How the hell did he get that job? Dan Andrews, how did he become Premier of Victoria? We know how. But it's got nothing to do with the real skill or an independent mind or a strong moral core. It's got nothing to do with it. So it's time we got rid of the faceless men and women who run the country, and we give it to the people. And I guarantee you the people do a better job than any government we've seen before.
Exciting times to be alive.
Oh, it's huge. And that's why I'm very optimistic. As bad as all of this is, and it is bad, the Australian people are getting a taste of what real life is like, and it's up to them to save the country. And I'll tell you what, if you want to live in fear, do nothing. If you want to take control of your life and your family and your country, it's time to act.
That's why I can't play video games, guys. I had to put them aside. I've got to do something. Got to turn this country around. We've got a country to save, really. So I heard you talking. You briefly mentioned before that you were actually talking about a Queensland talk you did last night. I was just wondering how they're feeling up there with what's going on.
Oh, they're highly motivated. They're extremely excited. In fact, that's the second talk I've done in 4 days for Queenslanders, and more people are getting very excited about the possibility of A1. And on top of that, more international interviews as well. So we're getting, A1 is now getting international coverage. One last week, another one coming up this week. But Queensland is extremely exciting. They have a state election on the 31st of October.
Okay.
And a lot of them are very keen for A1 to run candidates. So am I, but the decision hasn't been made. And I said there's some hard mechanics to play here. It's just, the desire isn't strong enough. You need money, you need people. And if you can get the money and get the people and the right candidate, the right electorate, then we'll consider running. But I think if we do run, we will do very, very, very well. They are concerned about what's happening in Vic. They understand that Victoria is like Dunkirk, and they are England. And they have to build their army and make sure none of this filth drifts north from Victoria through New South Wales to them. They set up the Brisbane line and keep it safe. But there's a couple of issues there that are getting Queenslanders very animated. One is the massive inconsistency of the lockdown that Palaszczuk is imposing.
Yeah.
There was a grandmother who travelled to Sydney for brain surgery, and the famed brain surgeon Dr. Teo in Sydney did the surgery, wrote a letter excusing her from the need to be locked down. It was denied, and she's in a hotel room by herself after having tumours removed. It's inhuman the way she's being treated. And yet, at the same time, just for those who weren't paying attention, the wives and girlfriends of the AFL wandered up into Queensland. Hooray, happy days. And the chief executive was out of the hotel. He didn't do his 14 days. He was out there with his mask on doing talks. And there's Palaszczuk with a picture of a football. These people are so bereft of ideas, they think bread and circuses are going to win the day. And they don't realise how goofy they look. There's the best description for them. They literally are just goofy. They're fools. And the Queenslanders are furious. There's another case of a baby undergoing surgery that wouldn't be allowed back in. But the footballers and their wives and girlfriends can, the wags, no problem. Because it's AFL and Australians are so stupid, they don't get it. Well, what the politicians are learning is the Australians aren't stupid. We're just decent people that are happy to take a hit for the team when we need to, but we also don't like being cheated.
Yeah.
And that's what's going on. The second thing that's getting them very excited up in Queensland is the Chinese government has a role in counting the votes in Queensland.
Is that right?
Absolutely. They're part of the process now. Let me guess what the result's going to be. I can't imagine. Now, do you think that the Chinese Communist Party, the criminal cartel that gave the world the coronavirus, that has been treating the South China Sea like its own personal lake, that's been building islands over decades now to set up a territorial claim to the South China Sea, that has killed and murdered countless individuals for organ harvesting, that runs slave trade production facilities so we can have cheap iPhones? You think this same organisation is going to make sure that the election result in Queensland is free and fair and transparent? Please. And as the Queenslanders saw last night, they have 8 weeks to change this. And the people behind Palaszczuk, they're hard. And Queenslanders, they're tough. And Palaszczuk's in the middle. And I can tell you, every politician I've met, they're like a jelly donut. You squeeze them hard enough and they just fall apart. There's nothing to them.
Yeah.
And I've had personal experience with watching these people crack and cry like babies at things that my diggers would just laugh at.
That's hilarious.
So Queensland is looking good.
Yeah.
If I could make a prediction, Queensland's going to be a very strong state for A1 because they've got a spine up there. It's a real frontier mentality, and they don't have time for nonsense. They're just good people.
How are the Chinese counting the votes up there for the election?
Oh, that's part of the process. It's not like CCP Proprietary Limited is going to count the votes. But as you saw when I gave you the rundown on the processes, like who's transporting the boxes, who's doing the algorithm for counting the votes.
Yeah. It'll be good to look at it in reverse in a few
Well,
weeks.
they've got 8 weeks to stop it. And as I said in A1, it doesn't come from me. If they want to save their state, they have to do the heavy lifting. Absolutely. We'll guide them, we'll help them. But it's up to them to save their state, save your electorate, save your state, save the country.
So the best thing they can do is really go to A1, sign up.
Sign up to A1, join a supporter group, and a warning to the trolls and spies: don't bother. Just don't. It's not a game. This is for adults only. Where Australia is right now, as I said last night, this is for adults only. This is not some fun and games around the electorate so that you can get pre-selected in 3 years' time. It's time for Australian political, what do you call them, monkeys that hang around the organisation hoping to get up make their way up the greasy pole. Grow up, stand up, become a man, become a woman, and realise there's something that really is at stake here. And by the way, there's the carrot. You might actually have a moral life, but there's also a big stick. Anybody, I've said it before and I'll keep saying it again, anybody found of treason and sedition, treason will be capital punishment and sedition will be life in jail. You steal a vote, you're going to spend more years behind bars than you will want to know. And it's not a bit of fun and games anymore, because you are stealing the single most precious thing that every Australian owns other than their kids. You take someone's vote, you've taken away their voice, their liberty, their life, their freedom. Everything goes. So if you think it's a bit of fun and games, don't. Because you will be arrested and you will spend years in jail. Years, not 6 months, not a $500 fine. You vote more than once, you will be locked up for a long, long time. So consequences are back, folks. No more consequence-free lies and carry on.
Look, Riccardo, I really appreciate your time coming in today. It's been very insightful, especially on this. This is very truly scary. Everyone, remember to share this. We've done very well last week. We've got tens of thousands of views on the first interview already. Share it. Keep doing that. It's great. It's the best thing you can do. Now, in terms of the marches this weekend or the peaceful protests, please be safe. If you're sick, don't come. Don't be violent. And look out for each other. And turn up. Because this is sort of a mountain we can't all look over right now. And if you want to be heard, if you've lost your job, you should be out there and you should be voicing your concerns, because not everyone is a COVID-idiot for going and expressing their opinions. So thank you, Riccardo.
Absolute pleasure. Looking forward to seeing you next week.